Listen, I'd like to tell you a story. A story of another person your age, a young girl. She wanted to live a normal life, but she was chosen. She was honored with a special duty. Some people would call it a sacrifice, but what she didn't realize at the time was that it was a great honor.
While you've been drifting through the universe, eating ice cream, playing with trains, war has been raging across the galaxy.
Mugchathra will destroy this village, including your family.
What if we fought the monster instead of feeding it?
You're a dangerous girl, Vela. Something tells me we don't even know yet how much.
What is this place?
Please tell us where our daughter is.
I'm sick of being a prisoner on this ship. We have to save them.
Shay, where are you going? Shay!
I found one of the crew. Are you? Me? From the future?
Hey everybody, it's Ron with Ron's Computer Videos. I want to thank you for taking time out of your evening and spending it here with us. Got a great interview. Let's get right to it. He's an artist, a programmer, and a professional lighthouse keeper, at least as far as the code is concerned. Oliver Franzke. How are you, sir?
Pretty good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for taking time to come on. I am a big fan of your work and everything that you've done at LucasArts and everything you've done at Double Fine. So I really appreciate you coming on to talk.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for the kind introduction and the nice words. And yeah, and thanks for having me. It's nice to talk to people who are interested in like the adventure game world, and so yeah, looking forward to this.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Let's just start. Growing up in East Germany, I'm just kind of curious, like how that affected your access to computers and games and things like that back in the 1980s.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, essentially, it prevented the access to computers. Like back then, I think if you wanted to have access to any kind of computing, you had to be a member of the party. Like very few people during East German time had access to a computer. And I think my first experience was actually like gaming on actual video game was like in a hotel that we went to visit family, and they had like an East German arcade machine, which sounds really crazy. And I think that's the first time I like actually saw anything like that, and definitely like changed my my world in a way, and this was very amazing. And then much later, there was like essentially after the wall came down, I had a friend whose father had like a East German PC, which was kind of more or less equivalent to a C64 in terms of its capabilities. And I had seen this machine at their house, and they showed me some of the stuff, and including some games. But after the wall came down, they kind of didn't need this computer anymore because I think they had bought like a C64. So they negotiated, or my parents negotiated with their family, and whether they could take over this computer, which we did, and that was great. Like I think I was about 8 years old at that time, and so I had a computer in my room all of a sudden, and my dad and I were kind of like, well, let's see about this programming thing, because it came just like the C64. It came with a built-in BASIC interpreter and had a low-level programming interface as well. And it came with like manuals that explained how to program the machine. And so pretty much since day one, in addition to like trying out some of the games that we had somehow got, also like programming this machine actually became a big part of my childhood. And my dad is an electrical engineer, so he kind of, at some point he lost interest in that part. It just wasn't his world, the programming. Like there were too few wires to solder up and whatnot. But for me, it definitely it left a big impression that you can tell the machine what to do and it will do it. And of course, if you tell it the wrong thing, it will do the wrong thing too. But yeah, from that day, like essentially since age of 8, I been programming pretty much since then, and definitely started. My early projects were games. In the beginning, text-based adventure games, because I had played games like Yugo's House of Horror and stuff like that at other friends' houses.
Yeah.
And then later, of course, I've seen the LucasArts adventure games, Zack McCracken and Monkey Island, and they left a big impression. So I was trying to infuse like some rudimentary graphics into these games. So you had like essentially a screen where with line graphics, I would draw the room, and then but you still had to enter the text, like what you wanted to do, like open the door and whatnot. And I never really got very far, but you know, I think it's significant to some degree that my first game, one of the first games I programmed was that, like actually text-based adventure games. Yeah.
Well, I mean, Zork and the Infocom games and all of that, it was such a took up so much of the gaming market kind of in the early 80s and kind of extending in, because I remember playing those on the Apple II back in the day. I know that kind of a big machine in East Germany at the time were like the Klein computer series of
exactly.
machines that were Z80 clone kind of machines. So that was
exactly
pretty great, because you could absolutely have like a whole world of software that was, you know, fairly transportable. You could, you know, just recompile it for whatever the target machine was, and away you go.
Yeah, it was a cool machine. Like it had extendable RAM. It came with very like the RAM that was in there was like small, tiny definitely compared to today's standards. But it had a way to extend it, which I never had this part. But yeah, in terms of software, you like other machines at the time had a cassette base, like so you put like audio cassettes in, and you could hear like the modem sounds. And most people know what modem sounds. That's why I'm using it as a reference point.
Sure.
So that's a kind of, you had to write down like at which, like how many minutes and seconds into the tape would your program start. So you had to like write this down, and then when you wanted to load it, you would have to like fast forward to that part and then hit play, and the computer would interpret the analog signals. And then if you wanted to change it, right, you had to load it in, make your modifications, and then write it out again into analog. It's pretty cool. And I'm bummed because all of the programs I wrote, like the cassettes at this point, are all like demagnetized, and it's all gone. But there is a website on the internet I've seen where somebody has found all these old East German games and other software for these like client computer, and essentially put them up as MP3 files, so you can download them, and then you can, in theory, still run them today. Yeah, so that's cool.
A couple of years ago, at there's a event in Wall, New Jersey, that's called the Vintage Computer Festival East. That a couple of years ago, I saw an amazing exhibit of computers that were, you know, from before the fall of the wall, machines that were clones of Western machines that were just available on the other side. That, you know, a black market for Western computers, but and the person with the display had a couple of the Klein computers there that you could actually see and talk about the upgrades and all of that. So it's so I am in a short list of people that have actually been able to see and talk and interact with some of those computers,
especially in the US.
And it's I think it's amazing just the innovation that went into, because people were so hungry for technology and for games and for information that that I can absolutely understand like why people would risk probably everything to have access to some of those things. But
I mean, it was world changing for most people, right? I mean, especially if the wall came down, like everything changed. Your whole world in East Germany changed, and then technology came in and a lot of other things. So I think for a lot of people, it was quite a crazy time of transformation. I mean, I just was, I think, too young to really have realized the magnitude at this age. For me, it was all just exciting. Like all of a sudden you had access to these machines and you could go and visit your family in West Germany and stuff. So there was a lot of, that's really cool. But I don't think I understood the magnitude of what was happening at that age. But it's good. Otherwise I wouldn't be here.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But before the fall, did you try to follow? Was there much Western media that kind of slid through? And when I say that, I mostly mean, what was the piracy scene like for playing Western games?
I don't think it probably existed, but personally, I don't. I think the games that I'd seen was stuff that actually was made in East Germany. Like I
Just
think
kind of
there was an underground. There was like an underground scene of people. Like this was nothing that existed as a profession in East Germany. You couldn't professionally make games and sell them. So people did it like at the side or whatever, and then like distributed these things themselves. In terms of Western media, like for games, really not that much. Like I think we had, like I said, my dad was electrical engineer, so he built like antennas so that we could watch television from Berlin. We were kind of like about an hour away with a car from Berlin. And so like I think I watched like the German version of Sesame Street, which like had some of the characters that you know from the US Sesame Street, but also had a couple of like German like Sesame Street monsters. So I watched that, even though that was not like something that was part of the East German thing. But yeah.
Well, after the fall and with the reintegration of Germany, I'm sure you had more opportunities to access technology and access information, and it was less of a or just access increased. But based on that, was that when you kind of decided that you wanted to pursue sort of a career in computing?
Right, yeah, like yes, that's definitely happened, like probably in the 90s, and at this point we had replaced the client computer with like a 386 like PC, DOS PC, and with that, that was super exciting. This was, I think, just around like 94 probably for me, and so this was like just as Doom came out and Command and Conquer came out, and like other games existed before. I was a huge fan of Dune 2, and I mean there's just so much stuff there. Mortal Kombat, and so like I think I really at that age also really got into PC games. Console games in Germany were not a thing, especially in East Germany. Like just very rare that somebody had like an NES or like a Master Drive or whatever. And so a lot of people just had PCs, and so there was a lot of sharing of software. So you would take your disks and like share it with friends or whatever. And I think I realized pretty quickly. So the thing is, like I said, I started programming when I was 8, and that's continued like probably like more or less intensely. And then with the access to the PC, the 386, I switched programming language to Turbo Pascal, which is, I don't actually know exactly how that came to be, but I had like the Bolin Turbo Pascal on my machine, and I had like a library that allowed you to do like the modex, so that you could actually write graphics, sprite-based graphics. And then pretty much immediately I tried to emulate all these games that I liked. So like I remember starting to write some kind of clone of Command & Conquer, for example. So I was a huge fan. 3D graphics was just, from my math perspective back then, was out of touch still, although later I would tackle this. And so I just kept programming. And then also this was like for us, like this is slowly when the internet also rolled into East Germany. So like, I had like this computer, and I also had people like on forums or whatnot that also were doing Turbo Pascal games, and it was this kind of scene of like indie developers, and they would share like libraries like for having sound in your game and stuff like that. And so I had like people that actually, like, it's hard to imagine these days. I actually like called them on the phone, and that's how you like coordinate. Like, I mean, get to know them like via the internet, but then you actually like, yes, give me a phone number, and you call them. It's like, hey, what should we do? Like, what project should we do work on? And that was crazy. So that's definitely kind of in the 90s. I realized like this is my passion. I spent like probably like every moment at home that I had nothing to do, like other things like on the computer, either playing or programming. And then later, the second thing that kind of plays into this is I really was interested in 3D also. Like this was the time when The Last Starfighter came out as a movie, or like maybe it was already out before, but when I saw it, I saw Star Wars and Star Trek. Actually, I saw Star Trek at my grandmother's house. That was also shortly after the fall of the wall. And just like, I like the understanding that you could make these kind of visual effects with a computer left a big impression. And then I got like a book that talked a little bit about some of the software you can use to do this. And it came with, back then was POV-Ray, which is an open source like 3D ray tracing library. And I started like getting into 3D graphics. And again, like the first things, one of the first like big projects I did like was remodeling the Mammoth tank from Command & Conquer, which is this like big tank with 2 barrels and whatnot, had like rocket launchers on top. And so I modeled that in POV-Ray. And the way that worked, like you essentially had to like type in the shape. So you know, there's a cube at this location and rotate it in this way. And then there's another cube. And then you describe the scene essentially just in a text-based form. So that's how I like made that thing. And then you rendered it out and like literally you could see every single pixel like appear because it would ray trace. And so it was very slow on my 386. And that was a lot of fun. And then later, because of like these connections I talked about, like with other people making games, I somehow got hold of a bootleg copy of 3D Studio that was still in DOS, so like a visual way of making graphics. And that definitely got me hooked. And I spent a lot of hours in there, like making sci-fi graphics and little movies and whatnot. And then, so this in combination with programming, like it was kind of, yeah, like just matched perfectly, because I could now use like my ability to make 3D graphics with my ability to program, and with my you know, interest in games, like just made sense. So like one of the projects I did was in a visual adventure game that I called Human Shock. This definitely was inspired by Myst and like some of these early visual adventure games where you just have these static screens and you click on things and you kind of have to solve puzzles. And that was cool. I made it pretty far. Like I created like the first environment and had puzzles in there and you could solve it and you could make it through this little demo. I even made like a little intro sequence of my like company logo and whatnot. And I was pretty happy with that. Yeah. So anyway, that's a long-winded answer to your question, that it became pretty clear to me, like by the time I was a teenager, that this is what I wanted to do. And then it wasn't quite clear for a long time for me in which one of these directions I wanted to go. I really enjoyed making 3D graphics. I really enjoyed programming. And yeah, but at this point, it wasn't 100% clear in which direction it actually would go later.
Sure. I know that you, I've seen some screenshots from Human Shock online, and even some animated, like some little animated sequences and stuff. Is that available anywhere? Have you made that?
Yeah, I can, you can splice it into your sequence. I can send it to you.
That would be great.
I have a playthrough video. It's only in German, obviously. But yeah, I can, yeah, definitely.
Well, don't worry. If we can get it into SCUMM VM, it'll be translated into 1 million languages.
Yeah, there you go. That's true.
Very cool. You had mentioned just a second ago about starting out kind of as a you know, on the graphic side of things, and then moving up and changing tools and things like that, and then kind of shifting over into the programming side. What was the project, or what was the job that just made that decision? Or when did you make that decision that was like, you know, I love the computer graphics part of this, but the programming part is really calling me?
Yeah. I will answer the question. I will just do a little detour to get there.
Sure.
So this is like now the late 90s. And I heard, so I was doing Pascal for a long time, but then I, you know, as I was learning more about like professional game development, which was very difficult because that scene essentially didn't exist in Germany. There were very few companies that made games professionally. There were a few that were really known, like there was the Settler series, which was Blue Byte, but they're kind of far away in like the west part of Germany. But anyway, so because of that, I had kind of learned like what the actual game developers use is C++. And so I got, you know, a book about C++ game programming, and I started learning that. And there was also the advent of DirectX. So like the first 3D accelerator graphics cards came out slowly. And so there was kind of like combining all these things. So I had learned C++ programming and DirectX like 3D as a 3D API. And then, like, I ended my high school as education. And in Germany back then, it was still mandatory to do like military conscription. So I kind of went to join the army for 10 months. And as this was coming to a close, I was like, okay, I have to find, because I was really passionate about it. Like, I was like, I want to find a games company to work for before I actually go to university, which was the plan that I wanted to do. I wanted to get like some degree in like a relevant computer science field. But I said, like, to bridge the time between the military service ending and the university, I want to do work on games. So I like wrote letters, like actual letters, to all the different companies I could find possibly in Germany. And I got actually a response, for example, from Blue Byte, the people that did Settlers, and they said, like, what you're doing looks cool, but here's a couple of tips what you can improve. And then I applied to a company in Potsdam, which is just outside of Berlin. There was a little like gaming startup that had done one game, and they said, okay, sure, we're actually looking for an intern in graphics. So why don't you come? And I went there to do my interview. And during the interview, I mentioned that I had also done some programming, and I think this probably was a good thing to do. And they said, like, okay, yeah, you can come. But I was hired initially as a 3D modeler. And so I started my first day to actually be with the team. And I was like, okay, so what can I model? And they were like, well, we need to like for the buttons on screen and like visualize which keys you're supposed to press. Someone needs to model like the keys on the keyboard. I say, all right, that's not the most exciting thing, but sure, I'll start with that. But then like one of the people on the team was like, but actually what we really need is we need help with the programming. Like we actually really short on programmers, and we need somebody to help out, like, implement the game logic for this game. Like, I heard you also done programming. Can you look at this? And I was like, okay, I guess so. And really, I never really done any artwork for this company that made it in any game. So I kind of got sucked into programming. But it's also like something I was very passionate about. And I was just happy to be there, essentially almost unpaid, working on games. But it was great. And then after a couple of months, I think they saw the value that I brought, and they gave me a full-time job until my studies started, my college time. And even after that, we came to an agreement that I would still do part-time work from the different city I would live in, where I would study. But yeah, so the decision for programming versus art was essentially made in this first job, where it just, out of the necessity what the company needed at the time, sure, it just became programming.
Was that TerraTools?
That was TerraTools, yeah. Sorry, okay. I didn't mention the name. That's exactly
no, it's right. Okay. I was going to say, because I know that you had some involvement with working on Urban Assault back then. So
no, Urban Assault was done at that point. That was done. Okay. That actually was like a big deal, because Urban Assault was a game that they did with like Microsoft as a publisher, which was super unusual at this time. Like, that's just German companies really had a hard time getting international publishers, and this was a big deal. But because of that, I think they had money. And the interesting thing is the location that they were in was like kind of crazy. It's this old villa, like on this beautiful lake in Potsdam. The villa that Churchill used to live in after the World War II ended, and they negotiated all these like terms of surrender and whatnot. Like, this is the building that for some reason there were like different startup companies in there, and we were one of them. And it was cool. So you had like your programming, like meeting rooms, and these big like meeting rooms with very high tall ceilings, and like these very fancy like wallpapers and whatnot. It's very surreal, but very cool.
That is really cool. That's a lot of history there. While history is being made.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah. You had mentioned that the German development scene was sort of very, very limited at that time. Maybe just a few companies that were operating.
Sure.
Was there? Do you remember maybe from that era? Was there a lot of was there a lot of competition and people trying to get people to kind of like, listen, we've got to have this person for our team for this project, and we'll give you this labor. I know that in kind of those emergent markets that there's more of that collaborative thing. We want to see everybody succeed at one level, because all of our fates are kind of tied together.
Yeah. Maybe that existed, but I think I was just too fresh to the industry that I wasn't really, I was not valuable enough to be part of that, and I never really heard it. I don't really know. I know that like the Berlin scene, like there are a couple of hubs in Germany where the games industry existed. There was one small hub in Berlin, and then you had like more like in South Germany where Düsseldorf, where Blue Byte was and whatnot. You had the companies there, and then some other places. But I'm not personally. At this point, also, I really didn't think much about like this kind of career thing. Like, could you advance by going to a different company? I just was too fresh, and I was really I was just happy that I had any company that was actually paying me to do this. Sure. That I was, you know, very much like married to this company, and like, I will go to hell and back with you guys. And although that didn't last very long, because as it is like video game startup, it didn't last. Like I think it lasted for 2 years that I was there, and then the company went bankrupt, like so many other companies. Yeah. Yeah.
Is that what kind of created the opportunity for you to go work with Sony?
Not quite. Well, yeah. So there's one intermediate step, and I think that's actually really important for me to even like leave the German game scene, which is also unusual. I don't think many people, well, these days maybe, but back then people didn't normally like go from like some small German company to like bigger other like international companies. When TerraTools went bankrupt, I was really bummed out. But we had a really cool computer graphics professor at our university, Oliver Deussen. And like one day, so the thing is, I all this time, even though I was working, I still was doing hobby programming on like graphics software. And now I kind of switched up my game, and I actually was writing like these ray tracing software myself. So I want to see if I can implement this kind of visual effects creation tool myself. And like I got pretty far, and I went with this project. I went to my computer graphics professor, and I said, "Look at this cool like ray tracing thing I built. Is there anything like a research project we can do? Because my other job just collapsed, and I don't have a job anymore." And he was like, "Actually, yeah, I have a little research project we can work on." And this computer graphics professor was pretty well known in the computer graphics scene. And because of this project, we wrote up a little paper that we managed to get into SIGGRAPH, which is like the most important like computer graphics conference. And I still don't know why, but he said like, "Okay, well, we wrote this paper, you're gonna present it." And I was like, "What?" And because the conference was in San Diego at this year, I think it was 2001 or something, I believe, or maybe 3, I forget. It's too long ago. And so he essentially invited me to come along, and that was my first time in the US, and also the first time where I had to like professionally like communicate in English. And I was terrified of giving this presentation, but I did it. It was a really cool experience, and I think this kind of opened my eyes to the fact that it is possible in theory to live abroad and do other things and get out. And then so I finished my degree, and I kind of at the end of my studies, I realized, okay, well, if I want to go abroad and try this out, then I need to do it now before I start a job here in Germany, because the likelihood of me like leaving my job in Germany and then moving abroad is much lower. Anyway, that was my reasoning. And so since I had done more like traditional computer graphics work, I was looking for actually jobs in computer animation at this point. So I was a huge fan of Pixar. Like, you know, this was the time when The Incredibles came out, and all these like crazy, like for back then, like crazy movies, which like blew my mind. And so I was trying to find a company like that. And initially I applied for the BBC in Bristol in England. And they actually wrote back and said like, "Oh, what you're doing is really cool, but right now we don't really have any open positions." And then I found a little tiny animation company in Glasgow in Scotland. And they said, "Okay, yeah, you know, you can come. Well, you know, we're going to pay you essentially nothing, but you can be here and do work." And I said, yes, please. This is great. Probably based on my experience with TerraTools, where like starting out, like getting a foot in the door is the most difficult part. So like 2 weeks after I had my master's done I was sitting in a train to the airport to fly to Glasgow and live there, which I'd never done before, and it was very terrifying. But it was a cool experience too. Now, the company itself was not very professional. They didn't really know what they were doing. There were problems there. And the movie that eventually came out was Billi the Vet. And for some reason they had managed to get the voice of Sean Connery to voice the main character. So that was kind of cool. But like eventually the movie came out, but like while I was there, it looked like this would never happen. Don't watch. I mean, it's not a good movie, but yeah, I worked on that. Yeah, so I was kind of, after about 6 months, I was like, okay, this is not going anywhere. And maybe I should see what else I can find. And since I was already living in the UK, I was mostly like looking in the UK. And through another friend I knew, he kind of told me about this gaming, or this like recruiter that he had used to find another job. And I said, okay, why don't I try the recruiter thing? And so talking to the recruiter, he saw that I had previously done games work, and he was like, oh man, you know, there's like Sony in London, and they're like looking for so many programmers. I think you should go there. And I was like, I don't know if I want to go back to games. All right, fine, I do the interview. So I took the night bus from Glasgow to London, and you know, got out of the night bus and walked straight to Oxford Circle, which is where the Sony offices are, downtown, like most downtown of London, and did the interview. And that actually went really well, I think, because of my like very widespread experience, like having done games, having done traditional computer graphics, having done like the animation stuff. They were really interested. I had several teams that wanted to hire me. And in the end, the team that I joined was the EyeToy team, so that did the camera-based games on the PlayStation 3. And that was also a cool experience. Definitely learned a lot. But yeah, so this is how I got to come to Sony. So a little bit of a tangent to get there, but here we are.
Oh no, it's that's an exciting opportunity, especially because I know that a lot of companies were putting everything into that sort of motion control and you know, sort of the augmented reality gameplay sort of thing, where you know you're directly interacting with things through you know, with like the Wii or with like the Kinect and Sony with EyeToy and all of that. It seems like there was a lot of that on the market at the time. So, but what games were part of that while you were on that team?
Yeah, so I was part of the like internal EyeToy team, and a lot of what we did is like it was smaller games that essentially were trying to just show other developers what you can do with the EyeToy team, like with the EyeToy hardware. And so there was just a lot of like nothing really known, but there's a lot like small stuff. I mean, there was another team at the same time, like SingStar is probably the most known, which is the music-based game that also used, you know, had EyeToy stuff. And I was like helping this team out a little bit, mostly because I was writing the particle system for the team, and they also used the particle system. And but yeah, so there was a lot of that. And this was also, I should mention, this was before the PlayStation 3 actually released. So like when I first joined Sony, you know, we had these like huge dev kits, and they were still very far away from the final thing, and you could actually like brick the hardware if you weren't careful and stuff like that. So that was really exciting. But it was cool, like the first time for me to actually work with like, you know, consoles, because my work at TerraTools was always PC based. So like the Sony was the first time where I actually like get my hands dirty with dedicated like console development kits, and that was a really cool experience.
Yeah, that is very cool. It's that brought a lot of people a lot of joy, and it was finally got over a lot of parents' objection to video games. It got people up off the couch and got them active. So that's a good thing.
Yeah. That's true.
But after your, I know that you continued at Sony for a while, and there were things that that you worked on that kind of kept going even after you had left the company. But was this about the time that you went and worked with LucasArts?
Yeah. So this happened. This was about So I stayed with Sony for about 2 years. And during that time, like I was hired essentially more or less as a tools programmer. But what I really wanted to do is I wanted to be a graphics programmer. So at every possibility, I would nag my boss and say, I want to do graphics, which is the reason why I in the end did the particle stuff, which is kind of like a blend between tools and in-game graphics. But because I also nagged them so much, they said, okay, fine. For your career development, we're going to send you to SIGGRAPH to just like participate. So this was, I think, the SIGGRAPH in Boston. I forget which year this was. But I had used this opportunity while I was in Boston to see if I can like get my foot in the door with any of the big animation studios. So I actually talked to like DreamWorks and to Sony Animation, and I talked to ILM folks. And it was tough back then. I think there wasn't much hiring, and like my experience at this point, since I was doing games now, didn't seem very relevant, so it was difficult. But I did stay in contact with the recruiter for ILM, so we're going back and forth, and he was like, I kind of like what you're doing, but right now we don't think we have any roles that you would fit in. But then over like several months, kept talking to him, and he at some point mentioned, we have this like LucasArts, like our game division, they're actually looking for folks, so maybe you want to talk to them. And I was like, I don't know. I kind of like, I've done games, and like maybe I, actually really would like to try out the animation thing. So I don't know how I feel about it. So like kind of dragged it on my side for a little bit longer. And then at some point, I don't remember why, but the CTO of LucasArts came to London, probably for some kind of conference or whatnot. And so the recruiter was like, look, we've got the CTO guy. It's just in London. Why don't you go and talk to him? Which I've done, and that was cool. And we doing more like kind of this traditional gaming interview, like, do you know your stuff about linear algebra and all of this stuff? And I think I kind of must have left some impression, because when he went back to San Francisco, like they talked to the internal stuff, and they were like, I think we would really like to hire you. Why don't we fly you out to San Francisco, and you can come and interview here? And I was like, okay, well, if they're going to pay for the flight and all that stuff, then I guess I got to go, because that would be silly to not, follow up on that opportunity.
Absolutely.
So I flew to San Francisco, went to an interview, like fell in love with San Francisco as a city and the West Coast. It's very nice. And also really with LucasArts as a company. I mean, since I had grown up with the Lucas Adventure games, just walking in there is kind of like a surreal experience. And like, on one hand, you have obviously the legacy of the Monkey Islands. They were working on like the Star Wars game back then, Force Unleashed. And then obviously also on the other side of the building, you have ILM, Industrial Light and Magic, that did all the special effects for all the movies I was hugely into. So you walk in there and you have like all these like model props from like Terminator, and like you have the Mech-Cat from like Slimer from Ghostbusters and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. I was like, this is the best thing ever. I have to work here. And so I did my interviews there also with several teams, and flew back, and like pretty soon after I got back, they said, yes, we want to hire you. We're gonna pay to move you over here. When can you start? And I said, okay, great, all right, fine, you convinced me, I'll come. And I moved to the US, and that's what I did. And then so like beginning of 2008, I started my work at LucasArts for an internal project that had nothing to do with Star Wars, had nothing to do with Indiana Jones, had nothing to do with Monkey Island at all. It was a completely new and different IP. It was a really cool team. But yeah, so that's how I got to start my work at LucasArts.
That's pretty amazing. I know that at that time that a lot of the development was very, very focused on Star Wars. There's just a period where we are just making Star Wars titles. So for something to kind of slide through like Indiana Jones and or something like that, we're looking backwards sort of thing.
Exactly. Yeah.
And even though it's like that movie came out in like 1970s, and we're still looking back to it. But I guess that's kind of at the same time though, you do have you're coming off the prequels, you're coming off of a lot of other things to kind of drive all that forward. But so what happened that something changed where they were like, hey, let's look back at some of these other original properties that we've created, like the Monkey Island series, and do some special editions of those games.
That seemed almost nearly impossible when I got there, which is Which is funny because I remember telling my friends in London before I moved that my one goal of going to LucasArts is to make LucasArts make adventure games again. But when I actually arrived, this was like when Jim Ward was the president of LucasArts, and he, like you said, his view was like, we don't look back at the history of LucasArts, like we don't look back at the Monkey Islands and the Zack McCrackens. We look forward, like in Star Wars games is what we're doing now, and they were actually doing an internal Indiana Jones game too. But yeah, so it seemed like this would never happen. But then with a lot of things, like something unexpected happened, and like we had a whole big round of like layoffs and management that came due to a management change. So like Jim Ward left the company or was left or whatever you want to say, and like we had a new president come in. But one of the things that happened as this management change happened, like that our project that I was hired for was canceled because they were like, we got to cut costs somehow. And like, we've got this like Star Wars game and this Indiana Jones games are in production. And it doesn't make sense to have a third like IP that's not any of these. But after the project was canceled and before the new like management group had established itself and had figured out what was happening, we had a couple of months where it was unclear what was going on. Like, you know, all we knew is that our project was canceled and we were all pretty bummed. And I should say, like, the team composition that we had was a lot of young people, roughly like in my age, and a lot of the programmers, in fact, all came from Europe, because coming out of the .com bubble that burst, right, you know, a lot of people in the US stopped studying computer science. So we actually, like, finding programmers was really hard within the US. So like LucasArts, like many other like US game companies, were aggressively hiring in Europe. And that's like how I came to be there. So we had all of these Europeans that grew up like playing Monkey Island on their whatever C64s or Ataris or PCs. And we were all there, like really bummed that our project was canceled. And one day, one of my friends said, like, you know what? I wonder if I can find like the source code for Monkey Island, like in the archives. And he was digging around, and he found it. And in fact, one of the very early programmers at LucasArts, EJ, Eric Johnson, had done a port of Monkey Island to Windows. So like, you know, obviously initially that was, you know, was running on DOS and Atari, all these other platforms. But the Windows version hadn't existed, so he had ported it to Windows, and so he found this port with the source code and all that stuff, and we were like, this is amazing, this is crazy. And this was also at the same time when the first iPhone was released, and I vividly remember like taking my bike to work, like riding along this road where we had the Apple store there in San Francisco, and like, it's like, what's going on? It's like a super long line around the building. Like, I don't know. Like, I wasn't really that interested in mobile phones at that time. But yeah, that's like, you know, people that worked and had iPhones. And then we kind of connected the dots. Like, what if we would, you know, take Monkey Island and put it on this thing? It has a pretty nice screen. And like, we could bring this game to a whole new generation of like gamers. And this is like, again, it's a whole new platform. Like, it's just infinite opportunity and possibilities. And we essentially just started working on this without anybody telling us. In fact, we were like, we're going to see how far we can get before management stops us. Right. And so we just we had this whole team of game developers that had nothing to do. And for some reason, we convinced everyone to just start this little project, like essentially. So we were, you know, making it so that the SCUMM engine could run on the iPhone, could run on the Xbox, could run on, you know, contemporary PCs. We wanted to see if we can, like, rather than just like porting the old game to, you know, with its 80s look, we wanted to see if we can like remaster it in a way like to put just new graphics on top of it, and can we like change the sound, like can we take the original MIDI and like can we have recorded like sections that we would play. And in fact, for Monkey Island 1, it never had the talkie version. And I know that I think you talked to Dominic Armato, right? And so we brought Dominic in to voice Guybrush for Monkey 1, and that was really cool. And so like before long, we had a pretty cool version of the beginning of the game that had like, you know, the fancy new high definition graphics. We had like, you know, fancy recorded audio, and we had like some talky stuff in there. And then, this was the time when I think the new management department had established itself and had to figure out what they wanted to do with the Star Wars and Indiana Jones games. And they came to see what we were doing, and we showed them that, and we were far enough along that I think we convinced Daryl Rodriguez, who was the new president at this point of LucasArts, to say like, all right, fine, you can, let's bring this over the finish line. This is really cool. And then it became like an actual officially sanctioned project. And right, so this is the origin stories of like the special editions, and with that, all of the LucasArts remasters, really, because without that, they would have probably not happened. And it's kind of cool and still kind of great to think about. It essentially was a grassroots project. Yeah. I don't know why they let us finish this, but I'm glad they did.
Well, I think that again, there's always a little bit of money to be made on nostalgia. And for a very long time, yes, SCUMM VM, things like that existed.
That's true,
MAME was a thing, but it was not accessible to people. And like you said, there wasn't like a way to just play it on an iPhone. There wasn't a way to play it on, some of these other platforms. You had to have a machine that was very much ready to go. And not just that, but you also had to have the media. You had to have everything. So I can absolutely understand why a project like this made sense, because it's like the development cost probably wasn't crazy, and you could turn around and it's an evergreen kind of project. You could just you can keep selling it and selling it. I remember when it was announced, I was so impressed. I loved the idea of having finally having a talkie version of Monkey Island 1. And when they were like, we're bringing back Dom, and I was like, this is going to be perfect. This is going to be really great. And then when I saw, you can just press a button and you can switch back and forth between sort of the classic look with the updated music, or with period appropriate or kind of period, contemporary music, or have the updated graphics and everything like that. I was like, this is perfect, because this is going to, newer gamers that aren't maybe married to the older art style will latch onto the new stuff. And then it also gives people that have played through these games a million times something new to kind of experience. So I cannot imagine all the technical hurdles that was required to kind of have all of that, where you could switch back and forth in real time, but it's amazing.
Yeah, this is another thing, since we're talking about grassroots stuff. So the Monkey Island project was really short in terms of like game production cycles. I think we sold it to the new management that we would like essentially get this thing done in 9 months or something like that. It was very short, 9 or 10 months. And because of that, like the programming lead, we were like, okay, let's be conservative. Like we said we would do iPhone, we said we did Xbox, we do PC. Let's just do like the bare minimum so we can actually deliver. And my buddies and I had talked about like, well, we have the high definition graphics, but under the hood, we're actually still rendering the old 80s like graphics representation of the game with the old sprites and all that stuff. Like, wouldn't it be cool if you could just flip between these things? And I was like, yeah, this is really cool. And I don't think that would be that difficult. And I went to my boss like, I think we should do this. And he was like, no, this is too risky. Like, we have so little time, we can't do it. And I remember we had this conversation on Friday, and I went home and I was like, no, we got to do this. And like, I spent the weekend just setting up a prototype where exactly what you said, you could press a button and it would fade. And like, you had to do a little bit of zooming because like the aspect ratio, we switched from 4:3 to 16:9. So I had this whole thing set up where you can have like a nice smooth transition between those two things. And I came back on Monday and I showed like the team, and everyone was like, this is the best thing ever. Of course we got to do that. So there's another example of like a grassroots feature that initially wasn't really planned for, but we just did it and we put it in. And I'm glad we did, because I think it made these things special. It actually put the special into the special edition that you could go between, because for people like me, you could switch back to the old version. Like, yeah, this is exactly what it looked like. But then it's pretty static. Okay, well, cool. But I can also go back to the HD graphics, and it's kind of nice. Although there was controversy about like the art style, but I'm still pretty happy with what we did.
There's no pleasing some people.
Yeah, for
And
sure.
so I think the fact that you could switch back to the older style, definitely, it's like, hey, it's fine. Just buy it for the fact that it is a talkie version that you can run on your
Exactly.
on a bunch of different modern pieces of equipment.
Exactly.
You know, so anybody, I know that there was there's always somebody that's going to complain about something. So Return to Monkey Island has a very unique art style, but so does Curse of Monkey Island. You know, so does a lot of the other games in the series. I mean, even between Monkey 1 and Monkey 2,
Huge difference. Yeah.
yeah, there's a huge difference in the because it was at that point that they could scan things and then,
Right.
you know, just import them into the machine and digitize them, and then,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
but everybody loves part 2.
Yeah,
So
and it
it's
was great. Well, obviously, part two was talky from the beginning, right? And
right.
there was a lot of stuff that made part two really awesome. iMuse was really,
Yeah.
hit its
Mhm.
zenith at this game. It was just a lot of amazing stuff in there.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and the thing
So
is,
yeah.
nostalgia really does hit a spot. And I joke, but I think like Monkey Island, I think was the only game during that era of LucasArts that actually made the company any money whatsoever, because the Star Wars, like Force Unleashed, was in production for so long, it was so expensive that even though they sold a lot of units, like I don't think they amortized that project to the degree. I don't know the exact numbers, but I know that Monkey Island was very well received, the special edition, when it came out, and it sold a lot. It's good.
Yeah, and it kept selling year over year because I do remember that anytime it was Talk Like a Pirate Day, the game would be on
True.
sale on GOG or Steam or wherever people would normally buy those things. So it's and I think after a while people sort of almost waited where it was like, you know, it's like, hey, don't worry, just wait, Talk Like a Pirate Day, it's going to be on sale again.
Cheap.
So
Yeah, for sure.
because I remember before Steam changed the rules and stuff, I would typically on Talk Like a Pirate Day, I'd buy 2 or 3 copies, and
Yeah.
then during the year would just hand them out to people or something like that. It's like, hey, have you played this? No? Oh, that's fine. So
Here,
you'd
take it.
send them
Cool.
the gift code, you know.
Yeah. That's cool. Well, thanks for spreading the game.
Yeah, no, it's I again, I love those games. My shelf up here is nothing but like LucasArts games from that era. So
Very impressive.
I'm a big Monkey Island fan. So yeah, it was no skin off my nose to try to get more people excited about the special editions. So but after the work wrapped up on special editions, was there anything else that you were working at LucasArts?
Yeah. So, like LucasArts at this time was really unstable. And unfortunately, I personally really like Daryl, the new president, but I don't know exactly what happened behind the scenes. But he also, like, we did another round of like management change not soon after that, and so Daryl left, and I think Peter Megan was the next one who came in. Who came from Epic, and like part of that was like this whole thing. So Force Unleashed had come out, and Force Unleashed 2. They were like, okay, these Star Wars games are great. And this was also the time when GTA was really popular. So people were like, okay, can we do like a Star Wars game where we like, do something with like GTA, but in Star Wars? And this initially, or in the end, this became like Project 1313. But that kind of 1313 really kicked off in this whole like power struggle again over like what is the new structure of LucasArts. And so the team that I was on, so I should do a little tangent here. So the team that I was on did the special edition. Because we were successful with that, they kind of said, okay, clearly you know what you're doing with these projects, so why don't you keep doing? And then we pitched them the idea of doing what we called LucasLabs, where we would do like smaller games that had a very compressed development cycle. And the one game that actually made it out in the end was a game called Lucidity. It was like a 2D platforming game that we got out. And that was again like super short. I think like also like 9 or 10 months, like from like nothing to the final thing. Very cool. But it didn't sell very well. It didn't have like, it's a new IP from LucasArts, which is kind of weird, and it's kind of an unusual game and very small experience. So it was hard to like LucasArts marketing just didn't know what to do with it, and so it just didn't really go anywhere. At the same time, our sister studio in Shanghai was Singapore, not Shanghai, was working on the Monkey Island Special Edition, Monkey Island 2 Special Edition. And they came back also with like, okay, we're gonna release this soon. And I looked at the build, and like a lot of the stuff that I personally had spent time on in the Monkey Island Special Edition, like Monkey Island 1 Special Edition, was adding these like visual effects to bring the world to life, like make the water animate and like put lighting in and all these things, like make the ghost pirate actually look like ghosts. And the build that came like from Singapore for Monkey Island 2, it had none of that stuff. It was very, they did a beautiful job drawing the high resolution art and whatnot. But I had none of these like animated elements, like the waterfall and things like that. And I went to the producer and said, like, we cannot ship it like that. And I said, like, just give me, like, take me off 1313, give me like 2 or 3 weeks. Let me like just go through the game and like put like visual effect element in there. And he was like, all right, fine. And he somehow negotiated that. And I got this time, and I like did like a super like sped up way, like just going through all the individual scene of the original game, just look at what kind of animated elements they had. You know, like I said, a lot of water elements and whatever, lava and things like that. And I went through and I put in all these visual effects element into the game. So I was at least like Monkey 2 Special Edition was at least at a point where I said like, okay, I feel comfortable releasing this, you know, because it should be something better than the Monkey Island Special Edition, you know, and not like regress essentially. So we finished that, and that was great. I actually pretty proud of that too. And then, you know, they essentially put the whole team after that onto 1313 because they just didn't know what to do with this like team was that made these small games. I think they wanted again focus on the bigger projects that they were doing, and so like essentially they took everybody in the whole company and put them on 1313. But since it was kind of a difficult transition, I really wasn't, and this was like, you know, my second round of layoffs and all that stuff. I really was like, oh my gosh, like I was just working for, you know, a year and a half with this amazing team, and now you like tear this team apart, and like this is really annoying. And some of the folks I worked with had left, and I was really bummed because of that. And I really was not very excited actually about working on 1313. Even though like obviously 1313 became its own like success, even though it never released, like had this big following and people were very impressed. But for me personally, like it was not a project I wanted to be on. And so I kind of like was like, I don't know what to do. Okay, should I stay here? Because on one hand, I loved LucasArts, and just being there was cool. I had talked a little bit to the ILM folks if I should, you know, come over and work on visual effects, but I also wasn't sure about that because I seen kind of the working conditions, and people were working just like really long hours, and I wasn't sure if I was up for that. So I was like, okay, fine. I guess I'm gonna go and like maybe talk to some games companies, but I only went to companies that I had friends already working there. And in the end, like one of my art director that I worked with at the Monkey Island 1 Special Edition went to Double Fine, and they had just wrapped up Brutal Legend. And, you know, I met him. He said, like, you know what, why don't you come over to Double Fine? We're just like, you know, down the road, San Francisco. Well, you know, on the other side of town. But why don't you come and I show you the studio? And I was like, all right, fine, why not? And I went there, and, you know, coming from the environment at LucasArts where it was really unclear about what's going to happen, and people being like heads down, like please don't fire me, coming into like Double Fine where people were just super excited about working on these like costume quests, stacking all these stuff. There was just this energy in the company that just was really, really cool. And so everyone was excited. Everyone had their action figures up on their desk and whatnot. And I was like, okay, this is pretty cool. I could think about working here. And I think they were also looking for programmers. And so I came back to talk to like their engine programming team. But it was really more like an informal thing. But I was like, here's a couple of like prototypes I did and this and that. And I showed them it was more like a conversation for like half a day with these folks. But I think, you know, I must have convinced them because they said, okay, yeah, you know, why don't you come and join us? And that was cool. This is the first time I actually met Tim Schafer personally, like doing this interview. He actually came in, like, this is always the last stage Double Fine interview. You know, he came in into the meeting room, and he was like, you know what, I just been playing like Monkey Island Special Edition on my iPhone. You know, thanks for making this. And I was like, you know, it's your game, so I hope we did a good enough job that you're happy with it.
Well, I would
But
say
yeah, so
that's
this
pretty
is
tall praise. That's pretty tall
yeah,
praise.
yeah,
So,
that was cool. And yeah, but then and Ron Gilbert was at the studio at this time too, because he like was in the early stages of the early production stage of The Cave, which I didn't know at this point, but like there was just being there was weird. Like, here's Tim Schafer, here's Ron Gilbert. I was like, wow, what's going on? And yeah, it was cool. But yeah, so this is kind of how I then left LucasArts, although with a heavy heart, and then went to work for Double Fine. But also, like, yeah, very happy to join that company. Yeah.
well, I'll definitely say as someone who has been the recipient of many great hours playing those special edition games and playing just introducing other people to them. Thank you for being a game code archaeologist and doing the work and digging all of this up. I'm certain that there are a lot of things that just weren't available that had to be recreated, but thank you for putting in the effort. It's pretty amazing.
It's my pleasure. I mean, it's my childhood. And actually, LucasArts was really good with archive stuff at this point. Like, a lot of the old stuff, the way they did the archiving is they took the computers of the people that worked on it and last day of project, and they just created an image of the computer. So when you got the archive back, you essentially had a snapshot into the computer that the person worked with. And it was always so fascinating. This is like whatever Tim's machine, and this is like Dave's machine, and seeing what's on there, the different tools and the different games. And I remember looking through one of the images, there was Doom on there, cool. Obviously they played lunchtime Doom sessions or whatever.
Somebody's having a little death match, right?
Yeah, that was cool.
That is pretty good. So joining the team over at Double Fine is I know there's so many amazing projects, don't get me wrong, but just to kind of keep on that theme with the remasters, when did you get involved with that project?
Yeah, this was a little bit later. So the project I worked on initially is the only external IP game we ever did at Double Fine, which is the Sesame Street game, like Once Upon a Monster.
Yeah.
So I was the lead systems programmer on that team, and that was cool. And then at some point, Tim had negotiated with Disney at this point, which had taken over LucasArts. LucasArts essentially went away, and Disney had bought George Lucas's IP, and with that also LucasArts. But they were negotiating because Tim wanted to really get Data Tentacle remastered. Yeah. And LucasArts actually had started, the Singapore studio had started on a remastered prototype for Data Tentacle. So they had done a negotiation and figured this out, and essentially came to us and can you do this project? And yeah, so we got the archives for this project and the early prototype, although we didn't end up using a lot of that stuff. But it was funny, essentially, working in a different company to then be handed back the code that you wrote, just a few years earlier at the other company to here's your code. And that's because it's still the underlying engine code was still very much, even though the version of SCUMM had changed and whatnot, the underlying port layer, essentially the abstraction layer, was still all there, and that was the old code. But it was good. I was very familiar with it. I could hit the ground running, and that's kind of, we turned around Data Tentacle also pretty quickly, pretty much following the same playbook that we've done for the special editions. Yeah.
I was going to say, I liked the ability to switch back and forth. I know that, especially one of the games I think that maybe benefited most was Full Throttle, just because some of the you could switch to the higher quality models for the 3D elements, and I will say that playing the it's the Destruction Derby part of the end of the game, where they had to bring back Grossman to figure out how to fix that after he had left at LucasArts.
That was crazy because they somehow the SCUMM was never made for this kind of top-down scrolly thing. So the fact that this worked at all is amazing. But that's just, it just shows you give people technology, and game developers will do some cool stuff with it, and that's holds true back
Absolutely.
then in the 80s or like in the 90s, and holds true still today.
I like the ability to switch back and forth. I think that so you can kind of enjoy the newer art style.
Yeah.
I do remember back contemporary to when the Day of the Tentacle remaster was released that people kind of poo-pooed the graphics a little bit because of the modern graphics, just because it was people have it in their head exactly what it looks like, and I'm like, I'm fine either way. It's cartoony, and that's how it was supposed to be. It's
Right.
supposed to look like hand drawn, animation.
The thing is, like, Tim was and still is in contact with all the artists that he worked with back then. Like we actually had, and that's the interesting thing for Day of the Tentacle, we had like Peter Chan and all these folks to actually like help out with the art and like do concept and whatnot. So in a way, you could argue that Day of the Tentacle Remastered is actually much closer to the actually intent of the original game developers than the special edition ever was, because nobody on the special edition team had worked on Monkey Island stuff originally, right? This came from a completely different team. Yeah, it's interesting. It's fascinating.
No,
but like you said earlier, like
yeah.
you can never really please everybody. It's just the reality of the world.
It's not, but I absolutely, I remember those conversations back then, and I'm like, you don't think it would have looked like this if they'd have been able to make it look like this? It's but those were the same people that also complained about the later Monkey Island games changing the art style and things like that. It's like, you're gonna have to get over it. Just enjoy the game, play it, and it'll grow on you, and you'll be just fine with it. And it's sort of like Star Wars movies, where the movie comes out and people are like very, very critical, and then about 10 years goes by, and then they're like, you know what, that's not too bad. I really do like Attack of the Clones. It's
a different generation of stuff. Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
It's true. It's true.
Time tempers all of that fire that
absolutely.
you felt.
Absolutely. I mean, the thing is with nostalgia, right? Is when you this is the thing for me personally also. Like you just what you have in your head, what you remember of the game back then when you played it first, like as a child, is probably very different from when the reality, like you just embellish the game in your mind. Because I remember when we started working on like the Monkey Island, I remember having the early scene of when Guybrush is on the dock walking up to the SCUMM bar, right, coming down from the Outlook down to the SCUMM bar, and I remember like having played this and like walking around in the dock in the old graphics. It's like I don't remember this being like all static, and like I remember that the ocean was moving, all that stuff, and and there was. And it's just like, I can't believe it. And I looked up the original. Yeah, it's really, I guess in some version it really was static. And this is the thing, like nostalgia, like in your head, you have something very different from the reality. And the chance you have with these remasters is that you can actually take what you remember and actually put it into reality, into the special edition. And of course, what's in my mind, how the scene looked like is very different than what other people will have envisioned. And that's why it's difficult to please everyone with that. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I mostly heard mostly about like positive feedback, and maybe also because I steer away from the overly critical comments. So
yeah, I think it's so hard to, and I people that are very, very negative about these things probably don't realize all of the moving parts that was required to make something like this. You're having to deal with, you're having to get Disney on board with something, and then you're trying to get as many of the people from these original teams and try to stay true to a vision, and you've got multiple companies fighting for like what they think it needs to be. And oh my gosh, the fact that it happened at all is amazing.
Excellent. Yeah, absolutely.
I
agree. Yeah.
I love those games. I replay them. I've probably played through Day of the Tentacle 1,000 times. I can literally just go and just click and just play right through it. Full Throttle takes me a minute. I got to remember some things. Grim Fandango, I have played through Grim Fandango 1,000,000 times. So, and I think that one, that is the most important of these from a game conservation point of view. You could, like there's SCUMM VM, and there's like I'm not going to get the name correct. It's like Grime or something. It's like the Grim emulator. that allow you to mostly kind of play it and make it work on modern machines, but to have something that is accessible to people, because the AI, and there's a couple of things that are broken in Grim Fandango when you try to play it on modern PCs. Yes, I don't even think you can install it anymore on modern PCs, but you can certainly get the remastered version, and it just plays exactly how it should. And the updated graphics are really great, and pulling out tank controls really great. Even though I am one of those people, I played through all the Steam achievements, which include that you have to complete the game with tank controls.
The thing is, Tim still, to this day, he will not budge and say like the tank controls is the best way to play Grim Fandango. And
well, I like the fact that I can just walk backwards. You know, it's just some of the animations are pretty funny. So
Grim was cool, and Grim initially came out at an unfortunate time, right at the very end of the cycle for like switch to Windows and DOS and all that stuff, and whatever, and so like it was much harder. It wasn't based on SCUMM, so like SCUMM VM you couldn't just use it on that. You had to like get a separate emulator. And I talked to Brad Mogilevsky, who was the lead programmer for that project, like why they did this, and he has some good reasons. Actually, you should talk to him too. He's got a lot of great stories. And so it makes a lot of sense why they made that decision. But yeah, it was a fun project to work on. Unfortunately, we never found the original, like the source assets for the backgrounds. Like while we could up-res Manny and the textures and whatnot, but what we really wanted to do is re-render all the backgrounds, so we have high definition out of those. But we never found it, but it holds up just good enough, I think, for the remaster, and we could
I know I'm someone who'll let you off the hook for the backgrounds, because I think the backgrounds very much the backgrounds are fine because of something very important, which are dynamic lighting and shadows, which was not in the original game. Like you could walk into a shadow and you were in a hard shadow, but if the second you walk into the light, so I think part of like the original footage and demo and things like that, where it was showing between the two modes, Manny in his office like walks over to the pneumatic mail system thing, and the shadow from the Venetian blind,
the blinds,
on his face, and I was like, I'm sold.
Yep, that was my project. I did the graphics programming on that, and that's something I really wanted to do. And it was cool. We had we had a script where we could take Grim Fandango essentially is graphics at 2.5D. So while it's flat on the screen, but you had some depth information that's baked into the image essentially. So we had one of our programmers did a script where you can take this and essentially create a 3D scene in Maya from the 2.5D background. And then the thing, Grim Fandango has different camera angles, like Resident Evil and other games had too. Right. So you can kind of reconstruct the scene from the different camera angles, that you had. And so we used that to get essentially a 3D representation in Maya. And then the artist could go in and add additional elements for the remaster. So like these Venetian blinds are a perfect example. We just put some cubes in front of the spotlight, and you just like put them down, and then in the game you could see like what the shadows would look like. And that was a cool pipeline, and it worked really well. Allowed us to do stuff like that with the shadowing. And yeah, I'm pretty proud of the shadows getting just like embedded in the 2.5D background. It took some finagling and making it work, because there's always edge cases, right, where you don't have clean data and like whatnot. But it mostly worked out, and was a cool project for sure.
No, it's amazing. It's one of my favorite games. It's on the shelf. So my only, or actually, one compliment on the updated graphics and things like that. I have profound color blindness. So I remember being stuck in the original Grim Fandango, because there is a like in the server room where you have to do something. It is not immediately based on my color acuity that you can flip the switch on the door to extend the lock. In the special edition, it does not make use, or maybe it does make use of a hotspot. I don't recall, but that is more visually, like, it stands out So, I mean, I already knew from having like beat my head against the wall in the 90s, but
Yeah.
but playing it when the remasters came out, I could look at it and be like, okay, this is something that I can just see, and I didn't have to ask somebody for assistance.
Yeah, to
with.
tell me. Yeah.
So
Yeah,
it,
we're doing a better job these days, but we're still not perfect. I think the accessibility stuff, it's something that becomes more important, and it's good. And we have to do still some way to go there. Yeah.
Well, it's appreciated. A modern game that I had to just put down is there's a game that's a kind of a horror first person game, and immediately right at the beginning of the game there's a color puzzle, and the color puzzle is how you unlock the game, and I'm like,
boy.
well, uninstall.
Can't do that. Yeah.
So if I sometimes those things happen, it just doesn't. I mean, I don't. It's not malice. It's just not a equal understanding of things. But the only thing I would complain about for the remasters is that they did not get some manner of retail release. We had to wait, and then later, I think limited run games,
the limited run games
did make some boxes for that, which is nice. But
yeah, and that's the tricky part, right? Because we don't, as Double Fine and Tim, we don't own the IP. The IP is owned by Disney, so like retail releases and whatnot just can't come through us. And like, I mean, they had negotiated the limited run like releases, and so we're glad that we were able to do those. But yeah, if any of that stuff, like real retail stuff, need to come through Disney, and I think that's just not what they're focused on at the moment, unfortunately. But who knows?
That's how it goes. Well, let's talk about some of your other projects and stuff that you've worked on there at Double Fine. And this is dipping back into the past a little bit, but Amnesia Fortnite, kind of in the wake of development for Brutal Legend, that it was basically just like, let's let some imagination run wild. Let's get some ideas for games. That's where the Sesame Street game came from. That's where stacking came from. That's where Costume Quest came from. But I know that you had a pitch that was called Redbot's Reboot. Was it ever anything more than a design doc, or?
No, it never really got any further than design doc. But I did flex my, how I a while ago talked about like my first job was as a 3D modeler. I did flex for the pitch, I flexed my 3D modeling skills, because the animated robot in there was embedded into like the real world shot is what I've done because I've got to do this because this is like a fun project. But yeah, no, it never really made it further than the design doc, because once the projects are chosen, then you're like you're on these projects that were chosen, and then you really and Amnesia Fortnite gets really intense because you have like these 2 weeks and you want to like get the whole project done, and they're usually a lot of fun because you work with people you have worked with before and people who normally don't lead projects, and you can create this like completely crazy stuff that you would normally never have time for. And so once the other projects were chosen, I poured my full energy into those, and Redbot Reboot unfortunately never made it very far, except that Redbot as a character internally is kind of a thing that has lived on. For Broken Age, the first character in the earliest version of Broken Age, because I was the lead programmer of Broken Age, the earliest character in Broken Age was Redbot walking around.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
That's great.
I had created animated sprites for Redbot to walk around the scene, and that like implemented the pathfinding with Redbot still. Actually, Redbot is in the cloud world in Broken Age. Like if you look around, he's like in there's like a dumping thing where there's some garbage. He's a little bit in there. You can find him. And also Redbot is part of like internal tools. Still have Redbot as its icon, so he has lived on, just not in a way that he initially had designed this game or pitched the game.
Well, it's good to hear that it at least internally gets a little love. I mean, it may not be can of corn level, but but at least it's still around, so that's great.
Yeah.
Well, I know that you after joining the team, you worked on so many projects. You worked on Stacking, you worked on The Cave. I love both of those titles. I did a playthrough on The Cave kind of during the I think the fall sale or something like that to try to get more people excited about it, because I like the idea of kind of that Maniac Mansion thing where it's you pick your team and everybody kind of complements one another and everybody has a fun little adventure. But let's actually talk about some of the games that you had more of that lead role on. Broken Age. I love this game. I think this is a lot of fun. I didn't get my fandom of it did not start contemporary to when it originally came out. I only kind of had time to play it just in the last year or so. But after I played the digital download, I was like, hey, I wonder if I can still pick up one of these boxed copies. So, and
Nice.
the artwork is beautiful. It plays like a dream. It's a lot of fun. Do you have any maybe recollections of the development on that?
Broken Age was fun. I mean, obviously that it was like the biggest Kickstarter in its day. Like, you know, it's like one of the early, like, big successful projects. And I think the initial project was called Double Fine Adventure. It was actually pitched by Two Player Production, who did there you go, you're showing that. Two Player Production, who had done the documentary about Minecraft. And they came to Tim and said, like, what if we have a Kickstarter where Tim, you make another adventure game and we film the whole thing? And so this got a lot of people very excited, and we got way more money than we initially asked for. And so the project became, bigger. And we kind of, one of the early decisions, so I had wrapped up my work on the other projects, and the technical director asked me, like, hey, do you want to be the lead programmer on this project? And I was like, well, do I? Like, another Tim adventure game, do I want to be? Of course I want to be a lead programmer.
Yes.
So one of the early decisions that we made, because it was Kickstarter, was much more interactive with the fan base. So we kind of, a lot of the decisions and, like, in development things, we also, like, talked about in the forums, and I wrote articles about it. And obviously we had the documentary that was coming on alongside. So one of the early decisions that we had to make is which technology to use. And we decided that the internal Double Fine engine that we had used for Brutal Legend and Costume Quest and stacking didn't really fit the bill, since we wanted to have this 2.5D or like 2D-ish game with, like, parallaxing. And we wanted to be on all these different platforms, like including mobile, which we had previously hadn't done. So we picked, like, an open source engine that we added stuff to, the engine was called Moai. So I, like, started pretty much as soon as the Kickstarter wrapped up, started, like, taking Moai and, like, putting our, like, adventure engine around the core that Moai provides, and the tooling and all that stuff. And it was a lot of fun to work with Tim so closely. I hadn't really worked with Tim directly, like, before. I was always with other project leads. So that was definitely a cool experience. But also this kind of just being in the fandom and, like, writing these articles, here's a decision we made and here's how this works, that works. That was a cool, like, just kind of a cool time in the games industry in general, I think. And it was a lot of fun. But then, of course, it came with its own controversy, because with a lot of Tim games, even though we had raised much more money, like, still the vision that Tim had for the game was bigger than even the money we had raised.
Right.
So then we had to split, like, the game up into two halves, essentially, so we could release something and then start generating revenue, and we can use the revenue for the next part. But it was a cool project. Did a lot of, like, graphics programming stuff also that I always wanted to have an adventure game. Now that you had a chance to write, like, an engine from scratch, essentially, for this purpose, put that in. And in general, it was kind of cool, like, because I had done a special edition, so I had some insight into how adventure game engine worked and what's kind of important for them. But I'd never, like, set something up from the ground up. And this was, like, a chance to see, like, okay, why were these structures in place that I had seen in SCUMM? Like, why are they necessary? To, like, essentially come to very similar conclusions and, like, use my experience with, like, the Monkey Island and whatnot to set up this engine. And I don't know, it was a really cool project.
Yeah, no, it's a lot of fun. I have played through it. I think my first playthrough of the game, I'm one of those people, especially on the adventure titles, where I exhaust every dialogue tree. I want to hear what everybody has to say. I want to fully experience this world. So I think my very first playthrough of the game was something like 17 hours or something like that. Like it took quite a while, and the hexabots didn't help. Just the reprogramming the hexabots.
Yeah.
Because I asked some people for help. I was like, hey, I don't understand like how I'm supposed to get started. And they're like, oh, well, just wire it up and just experiment. That's the whole thing. And I'm like, oh, okay. So you wire things up and then you're like, okay, well, now I kind of get it. I can start. I've still got my notes from forever ago,
Cool.
where it's like, okay, I understand what this does now and how this all works. And so
cool.
but then I did not realize I actually stopped and picked up the game again a little while later. And I was like, you know what? I've forgotten a few things. I'm going to start over. But I had my notes and I didn't realize there's kind of an RNG element to like how that works with with how the bots are wired up. And so I'm like, I swear this worked last time. So I was like, okay, hold on, let's try it again. But so yeah, 17 hours the first time for like a complete playthrough.
Yeah.
And then I started looking at the achievements, and one of them is basically, if you can beat the game in less than an hour. And I'm like, there's no way to do this. Well, I banged my head against it until I did it. So.
Nice.
I went through and I have a 4-page. I started writing strat down where it's like, okay, you got to do these things and you got to do these things in this order and try to optimize the path you go on.
And then skipping the cutscene and like skipping lines as your best friend. Like you're just like,
yes, it's like, okay, well, I mean, I know what they're gonna say. I'm not being rude, but it's like
that's right.
I know what they're gonna say, so I can get through it. But I went through and I think I was able to beat the game in about 55 minutes or something like that. Nice. And then I go online and the speed running community, of course, they've got this all broke wide open, and there's people that are like 38 minutes and stuff, and I'm just like, you crazy,
so crazy, yeah.
But yeah, while you've been there, you've worked on so many other amazing projects, Psychonauts 2, and then maybe most recently a little game called Keeper. So there was a bit of a break between some of these other games and Keeper. Do you want to maybe talk a little bit about the development cycle?
Sure. Yeah. I'm in my 15th year now at Double Fine, which is cool. Unusual in the games industry to stay with one company for so long. But I really like the people here, and like Keeper was it's another Lee Petty game, so it's the creator of Stacking and Headlander, which are both projects I worked on and really like. And when he pitched me on this game, where essentially he came and said like, I want to make a game that's all about everything being weird, I was like, okay, you sold. I'm off. Yes. I'll join this project. This sounds great. So there was a lot. I mean, the thing is about Double Fine, people will realize like we don't tend to repeat the same game or like do sequels very often. I mean, Psychonauts 2 is kind of like steps out of this, and even there, there's some innovation in there. But we kind of reinvent the wheel. We start just different projects, and with that, we kind of start fresh and how we look at this problem. So like just even getting this project set up with this goal of like let's make something weird was a lot of figuring out how we're going to do it and what we want to do and what is the game. And I don't want to give away too much for people who haven't played it, but it is unusual. Like I can say this much, that the main character that you play as in the beginning is a lighthouse, like you mentioned in the beginning. And that's certainly, I don't know if there are many other games in the games industry where you play as a lighthouse. So it's this is what I mean. Like it's a unique experience. I'm pretty proud of what we achieved. I worked again on a lot of the graphics programming side of things and a lot of like systems, so like making sure the memory fit in memory on the consoles or whatnot, a lot of that kind of stuff. I'm pretty happy with what we got. I think it turned out to be like a really unique experience. And it was fun, like watching the streamers play the game, and like especially towards the end of the game, like things change pretty dramatically. And I'm not going to give anything away, but it was interesting and fun watching the streamers like running into these moments. They're like, what's happening? And it was very, very satisfying for sure. But yeah, it took, like you said, it did take much longer than in the past. I think one thing that happened in between is that Double Fine for the longest time used to be an independent game studio, so it was owned by Tim. We had no other external like companies we were beholden to. Obviously, we had publishers that we did projects with, but then during Psychonauts 2, we joined Microsoft, so we became a first-party Microsoft studio for various reasons. I'll let you have your interview with Tim. He can talk about that.
Yeah, sure.
But that kind of changed a little bit, like how we do games, and like and we're kind of figuring out how we work in this context. And like Psychonauts 2 was technically the first game we did under this new umbrella, but we had started before we became part of Microsoft. So like Keeper is like, I think, the first game that we shipped that is purely like started out as part of a first party Microsoft studio to its finish. And we switched to Unreal as the game engine, not our internal. So there was a lot of like figuring out all these new things. And
I'm sure getting acclimated to the tools and everything took a little bit of time.
Exactly.
So please don't interpret that as a slight or something. Art takes time.
Oh,
that
absolutely.
But this game is absolutely art. It is a game, but I think it's a very important reminder of how games have transformed from Pac-Man, or rather Ms. Pac-Man with a little cutscene in the middle, or Maniac Mansion with cutscenes and things like that, and how it's become this way to really tell some amazing emotional stories. Just watching the trailer, if folks at home, and I'll tag the trailer onto the video here, the interview here, but folks that have not seen the trailer need to definitely go and watch it, because you will be able to feel the emotional connection that is built in the game, and without revealing too much. It's a smart game, and I like it a lot.
I'm glad you like it. It has no words in it too. Like there's no talking character. So we set ourselves this challenge, like, can we tell the story without actually having a human characters or having words or whatnot? And again, this takes time to figure out how you actually do this. What is the kind of story you can tell, and then how do you do that actually? There's a lot to figure out.
It's yes, again, it takes it takes a bit, and it's a very empathic sort of experience. So you have to be able to look at these things and kind of project yourself into all of that too. So I hope people. I don't have to hope. I can look at what the reviews are, which have been nothing but great. So I'm glad that a lot of other people understand that too.
Yeah. I think as a games company, whenever your game breaks out of the gaming press and you get a review in like the New York Times, for example, it's always like a good sign that you managed to connect with people that normally don't, are part of the gaming scene. And that's for me, that's important, because I do appreciate, and I play a lot of more traditional games, like our sister studio, like the Doom Dark Ages, for example, great game. I love it. Played it. It's fun. And just like making something that fits not into that mold, it's a big risk and a big gamble. And if you actually do it, and then you can, you actually get a little bit like people outside of that world to be interested, normally wouldn't maybe touch Doom Dark Ages, then I think we achieved something. And I'm happy with it.
Absolutely. Well, Oliver, what's next? I'm not asking for spoilers, but what's next for you?
It's not really actually 100% clear. We're still like Keeper. The way games works, like you have a post-ship cycle of having patches and whatnot. And since my specialty is engine and systems programming, a lot of the post-ship patch stuff, I'm usually still involved, which is true here as well. I mean, we did some additions to the game. Like, for example, we added the black and white mode, the noir mode, recently, and we added support for ultra widescreen. Stuff like that, responding to the feedback. So we're kind of wrapping up the loose ends of Keeper. Then I'm actually going to have a little bit of time off after that, and then when I come back, I kind of have to see which project I'm going to join. Essentially, we'll see who has needs for my abilities, and then yeah, we'll see. I mean, if I had full choice, like one thing I would love to do, but that's probably not going to happen in like anytime soon, is I would actually love to remaster some or more of the old LucasArts adventure games, but very difficult because negotiating like with Disney, and these are not Tim games either, so it's hard to have these negotiations when, you know, really at the studio nobody was involved.
Sure.
But I keep mentioning it in all these like interviews because just in case somebody on the Disney world like hears this, like talk to us. I would love to do Sam and Max hit the road.
Yes,
Love to do
that
that.
would be really great. I'm sure that Steve Purcell would love to see a remaster of that. But if that does not pan out, ask me about Loom.
Yeah, that's right. I think I have the button here somewhere.
Oh, really?
Somewhere. I think one of the
Somewhere.
special editions, something that was like you had to actually ask me about Loom.
Yeah. That's great. Oh, Cobb. Will he ever get his Loom remaster? I guess we'll have
That's
to wait
right.
and see.
That's true.
Oliver Franzke, thank you so much for your time.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun, and yeah, it was good talking to you.